Well, it's 9 o'clock, or it's 1 minute past. So I'm gonna just introduce the team that we've got today and explain the format. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Pam Bateson. I lead Thrive Partners, which is a digital coaching platform that provides a platform for people to use for their own internal coaches, mentors, trainers, facilitators, consultants, as well as doing group coaching and webinars. And we have a global faculty of 230 coaches. So the benefit of that is we spend a lot of time talking to corporates, and this topic really came out of, you know, the theme that we're finding a lot of people coming and asking about, which is how do we upskill ourselves, how do we stay relevant, and how, when we're working from home, how do we kind of really stay close to actually what it's all about, you know, and feel as though we're involved in purposeful endeavour. So really, that's what drove our conversation for today. We have with us Sam Trigg, who is the head of coaching in Ogilvy, and obviously he's very well connected across that organisation in the UK and Europe. And then we have Mel Gloyn, who is the head of learning and development in Virgin Media. And so the format is I'm going to set some of the context around these themes that we're talking about today, and then Mel and Sam will certainly share with you kind of some examples of what they're doing to be able to address these two key points, which is how do you keep people connected to a purposeful, meaningful work experience, and then how do you kind of bring the skills through that individuals need with the changing agenda in the workplace, as well as what they're looking for to be able to be distinctive. The way that we typically like to run these is a round table. So we'll invite, if it's okay with you, we will kind of go through some short presentations of around 15 minutes. And then we've got some time for questions for each of our team today. So please do ask questions. And then in the last 20 minutes today, we'll open it up to a full round table, and we'll pull experience as well from each person in this round table today, and invite you to share examples of what you're doing. Okay, so do feel free to turn your camera off if you want to, but if you are talking part of a discussion, we love to see you. So please put your camera on, and if you're struggling with the mute, then Annie, who's our host for today, will help facilitate with any tech things that are running on in the background, and she'll also pull questions through from the chat. And just check you're still on, Annie. You're there, aren't you?
Anybody has any questions, post them in the chat if you don't want to talk live, or I'll just call on people as and when they have questions at the end of each presentation, and then for the roundtable. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to pull my my deck up, and I put some words in my deck, so that's so that we can forward the deck onto you afterwards. Is my deck showing okay there?
Yeah. Absolutely, yes. The right one.
Lovely, thank you for that. Okay, so let's just think about kind of some of the context that's happening here. Just trying to get it to change. There we are. Right, so one of the interesting stats that has come out of some of the Deloitte work they've done in their global capital human trends is that when they've researched HRDs and CEOs, an astounding statistic that came through was that CEOs and HRDs believe it's easier for people to find a new job externally than it is for people to move internally. And that kind of raises a few alarm bells for me, because if actually individuals are and senior leaders are saying actually it's just too complex, it's too hard, it's not visible enough, it's not easy enough for us to retain our talent, well, it kind of immediately pulls to the first flag, which is how do you make this more effortless, more meaningful, and more practical for people to be able to feel as though their skills are wanted within the organisation and that they want to stay. But when you do talk to people about kind of what the number one reason is why they're leaving, certainly a lot of the statistics turn to this as being the major indicator that people are leaving because they feel as though there is an inability within the organisation to learn, to grow, and to feel distinctive. And that's quite paradoxical to me when organisations more than ever have an abundance of learning interventions, whether it's Udemy, whether it, you know, if you think about all the content that's out there in various learning experience platforms and learning management systems, the fact that people are feeling that actually, you know, this paradox that you were talking about there, Alicia, which is, you know, I want to be able to be in the role and learning from within the role and not just learning from flat content. You know, how do I kind of really get hold of what I need to do to take hold, to kind of take and move my overall skill base forward. And we know with kind of the, if you look at kind of the demographical changes that are coming through and the shortage of labour and the expectation that 80% of the skills that are needed in the roles in the workforce are different to the ones that we have today in 2030. It's building some of this paranoia around what type of skills do I need to have to be able to perform in these super jobs, and to feel as though I'm not in a crowd, that I can stand out, that I can be distinctive and I can feel valued. For those of you that were on some of the LinkedIn webinars a couple of weeks ago, one statistic that smashed me in the face is that LinkedIn have 690 million members today, and they surveyed them on the particular requirements that they've discovered from the COVID lockdown. And the important statistic that came through was that 8 out of 10 of their members wanted to keep on working from home. And that forced two key conversation points in the sessions that took place a couple of weeks ago there. One was this ultimate debate, which a lot of you have alluded to, which is how do cultures need to shift to support this new distributed workforce? And how do you deal with burnout? You know, they're saying that people are 4 times more likely to experience burnout, whereas you've kind of got this perpetual, you know, kind of blending of personal lives, professional lives taking place at the same time, and people trying to find a way to balance and not feeling as though they've got to sit in front of their screen for 10 hours a day to be seen to be doing the right things. But how do you kind of give people permission to do meaningful work, but that isn't counted in the number of hours that they're in front of a screen? So as you look at kind of, you know, this kind of idea of being in this kind of 2-dimensional, looking at a square screen, and, you know, automation being constantly even more prevalent and needing to be more dexterous in kind of the various pieces of technology that we need to use, the ultimate question is how do we bring meaning back into work, and how do we captivate and bring this kind of notion of and core value of it's, you know, that it's human potential that moves us forward. And when actually people are just driving through their kind of to-do list and their activity list, what conversations do you need to put in place so that, you know, human potential, ideaship, intrapreneurship, this kind of people being able to contribute what they believe is needed in this time, rather than this kind of micro team of managers trying to work up the answers in isolation. How do you bring those kind of that creativity and support from the overall team that work with you to show their true potential in the work? So I'm going to propose that there's 4 or 5 things that organisations need to kind of really look at. Number 1 is an obvious statement, I think, and that's that, you know, we need to change the way that we need to learn, and learning needs to be in the flow of life. And what we know is that we need to continue with this drive to make learning more integrated with work. It needs to continue to be personal, lifelong, continuous, and vitally, it needs to be on demand. You know, people want the learning when they want it, and they want it now, they want it served up, they want it in a way that facilitates thought leadership, thought partnership, chewing ideas over, being able to kind of shape something up so that at the point that they're going to present it, they feel clear, they feel as though that they've been able to chew something over and think something through. And that, you know, that creates a whole different type of ecosystem that's needed, which is how do you create more peer-to-peer learning, and fundamentally believe that all the experience that you need can lie within the organisation, and very few of the answers need to come from outside. How do you capitalise on that? How do you create that momentum? Secondly, how do you enhance talent mobility? If that age-old thing that we've heard be talked about in various management articles and business schools, you know, over the last 15 years, it is true to say that organisations have to win the war for talent on the home front. You know, you've got to design a way to keep and nurture your internal talent, given that there is a fundamental belief that it's easier to leave than it is to stay. Which means that this kind of job crafting, how do you invite people to say, how do your jobs need to change? How do you want to recraft your jobs? What do you want to bring in that will make you feel as though you've got stretch, you've got freshness, you've got newness, you've got stimulation, you've got growth? And what is it within the organisation that you want us to pay attention to? And how do you want to participate in us paying attention to that? And this is where you turn into the whole idea of what's the mission, what's your personal mission for what you want to do in your job at this time? You know, what are you passionate about? What would give you personal growth? And what's the thing that you want to own? And certainly in a lot of organisations that I've worked with over the years, you know, utilising rapid action change groups and putting people around common areas of interest, creating a common denominator where people feel as though this is something that I want to participate in, belong to, grow in, learn from, and bring a personal touch, is something that's highly successful. And we know as we kind of move through the world of work, I guess all of us are seeing that a job is now not just a job, it's a super job. There is a fundamental expectation for everybody to be multidisciplinary, to be more digital, to use more data, to access more data, to manipulate and think through and use data in the way that they make decisions. And that, you know, that's what that has meant, and we've seen it happen faster than ever before. We've seen this kind of combining traditional jobs, you know, and giving people the opportunity to work more with technology and to really start to think through, you know, what's the right way in which our organisation utilises this context to be able to create teams and to be able to create kind of these broader contexts for our skills. And, you know, it's a question that I would ask you all to kind of really contemplate, that given that, you know, GPs are 60% of the patients that they're seeing, you know, are coming to talk about actually isolation and loneliness, you know, in a more connected world than we've ever been in. You know, there is a fundamental need for organisations to think about how to make the world of work a team sport. How are you galvanising people around a topic, a theme, a project, a programme? And how do you show people how to work in a way that makes people feel as though they're in a team, beyond, you know, this kind of bad behaviour that we've seen on some of the meeting etiquette on Zoom and Teams? And, you know, how do you keep people so that they're leaning in rather than sitting back and doing other stuff? So what can you do to force time and attention on forming personal relationships and, you know, keeping people feeling as though they're valued and they're wanted and they're seen? You know, and what's interesting is on one side, you've got people feeling as though more than ever their life and their whole kind of who they are is more present in work. But on the other side, the race and the rush and the push for, you know, kind of getting work done has meant that to some extent people are suffering from feeling as though they don't belong to something. And then, you know, this one of this challenge that you were talking about there, Brian, about, you know, what is true leadership in this context? To some extent, people do need to know, what do I need to deliver in this next 90-day sprint? How do I contribute? How do I know that it's adding value? But how do you create the leadership conversation where, yes, people have got clarity on what do I need to deliver here, but on the flip side, you know, how do I bring through this, what I'm seeing and what I believe is important in dealing with this new ambiguity and the uncertainty? What are my ideas? What are my proposals? What are my suggestions on what the organisation should pay attention to? And what do you need to commission as L&D professionals, you know, in terms of AI-driven technologies or cognitive tools? What do you need to put in place to facilitate this new context for work so that individuals can participate in a meaningful exchange of ideas. And then finally, you know, this how do you understand people's aspirations? How do you kind of connect them into what's needed to happen within the organisation? But as we've seen much more broadly, the fire that's happened in a lot of our bellies about, you know, ending inequality. You know, one of the interesting stats from LinkedIn is that the most underrepresented and underhired generational group in COVID is 25 to 35-year-old women. They are the ones that are suffering most in the employment market, which I found a completely fascinating statistic. So there are multi-generational, multi-gender, multi-geographical groups that, you know, are being impacted in different ways. But how do we say to people, what are your aspirations? What do you want? What do you want to impact? And how do we allow you to take your place on the things that are really important to you? So just to finish on my session, you know, I've kind of I've summarised it into 5 core areas. Whole system listening, how do you kind of create this kind of way of allowing people to feel as though that you are in tune with them, and how do you design tech that listens to all the conversations that happen in the business? How do you review how meetings are going and give people the opportunity to talk about what they need from it? For individuals, do you design jobs so that they've got a third of new skills that they're using, a third of what they've occasionally used but need to use more, and a third of their day job being the stuff that they can do with their eyes shut? You know, are you designing jobs to be able to kind of have those 3 elements? To what extent are you making sure that people know what the team purpose is and how they contribute? And finally, you know, how transparent are you being with the way in which you're communicating and showing that people are valued and are not just machines that need to deliver a workload? I'm happy to talk and take questions. Does anybody want to comment on any of those points that I've made there, or share your observations or reflections on the current context for work? Annie, I'll let you pop up the slide with general questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few comments that have come through just to share with you are working from home. Some people don't have that privilege and the difficulty that's put forward for them. So that's coming through a little bit, if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, what are people's thoughts on this kind of whole group of people that don't work from home, don't want to work from home, are desperate to get back in the workplace, don't have the ability to be able to work from home? How are you blending this group that actually only want to do that with coming to the session, coming to work?
Pam, it's Brian. I have had some challenging conversations over the last couple of months about this subject, where I feel quite strongly that there are 2 things that matter. One, there is a risk of inclusion being the cost of assumptions around people's ability to work from home, both physical ability to engage with and connect with their colleagues. So, you know, I find there's differences between extroversion and introversion that play out much more in a much more complex manner on Zoom than they might do in a physical room, for example. Yes. And the basics of being physically set up to work from home. I have people in my own team who share a flat with 3 other people and don't have a shared workspace at all. And we were just commenting on chat that, you know, it's often the very privileged senior management who are sat in their studies at home with a perfectly feasible setup who are talking about how beneficial all this is. So that's one point that I think needs examining. And second point, I think there is consideration around what's a return on all the investment done prior when we were sat in an office in a community that was social. I think this experiment is somewhat weighted towards, we left the office in a rush, having built all those relationships. We weren't hiring new people into the remote world and trying to engage them in what the business is facing in the short-term future. And I think that needs a lot of design and thought around how do you do that if this was the new normal. And I would describe the last 3 months as anything but normal. It's highly unlikely that kids will be at home. There'll be no schooling. Partners will be sharing the office space with you. So again, I just think there's some hotspots on thinking that was what we should base the future design of full flexibility on, because everything about that's positive and very exciting. Just think it needs a little. There's sometimes a failure for the design discussion, I find, in the enthusiasm to say this is great amongst some of my leaders, at least.
Yeah, I was talking to a university, someone that was heading up the whole talent agenda in one of the UK's biggest universities. And I was saying, how are you facilitating all of your academics and students working from home? She said, well, Pam, I'm stood here. I've been in meetings for 10 hours. She said, I use my ironing board as my desk because I can't sit down. It's absolutely exhausting sitting down all day. I said, have you not got an office chair? She said, no, because if we buy one from me, we've got to buy one from everybody. We haven't got the budget in this context to set everybody's home office up. And it really did, it kind of illuminated to me kind of this whole principle of the complexity of saying work from home when she's also got 4 boys there and trying to stand in her bedroom with her ironing board as a desk because actually she hasn't got a comfy seat. You've got very fundamental issues like that, as well as giving people the opportunity to decide whether or not they want that flexibility to come in the office and how you make them feel safe and how you make them feel as though when they're in these meetings or in their projects that, there's not a lesser or a senior, group, because if you're working home versus being in the office. So it's complex, isn't it? Has anybody found a way to do it well? Is anybody coming up with some positive solutions for how to enable this?
A couple of really nice comments coming through. I don't know if Keith or Mark want to talk around the comments they've been posting. That this is actually a more inclusive way of working as well, and that some of the more disabled communities have benefited from home working that they may not have before. And Alicia, I love your comment on mindful and purpose. Because we left in a rush. I don't know if you want to talk around that as well.
I think just listening to Brian there, certainly for me, is sort of we did leave in a rush. We absolutely did. I was actually thinking, I think I've got a packet of crisps still open on my desk, which is slightly terrifying as to what it's going to look like when I go back. But there is something in, yes, we left in a rush. We cannot, we must be very mindful. We must be very, very purposeful as what that going back looks like. Something that we found very useful is sort of noticing the language we're using about going back to work. It's like, well, no, we are working. We are working.
Yeah.
What does it mean to go to an office?
Yes.
Proximity, location, and also sort of we've had a number of people having this almost romantic fantasy about, oh yes, let's go back to the office. Right now, the office is what your desk looked like. Nobody is sitting next to you. There is a perspex screen being constructed all around you. To go to the bathroom, you have to go down a one-way system. It's likely to be a ticketed one-way system. To be able to eat in these sort of big shiny offices that some of us have in the sky in the city, you have to have a Tupperware box. You will be able to sit at your desk. So there is this concept of what an office is going to actually look like. And yet also, and I completely agree, we have so many people struggling with what does work look like right now. I am one of those. I do have an office at home, and I always have had, because that was very much a need for me in order to live. But I still live in South London because my big shiny office in the sky is nearby. So there's something in actually what is the future that we're trying to plan for? Is it the future in the next 6 weeks, or is that actually in the next 6 months, and then going through to say actually we do have this disparate workforce, and that's okay, and that's what we're striving for. Yeah. So you're right, you're absolutely right. The complexity, this layer of onion is extraordinary, and it seems to keep going and going and being interplayed. But certainly the language for me has been a big one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, on that note, I am going to welcome Sam Trick and invite Sam to share some of her thoughts on what's happening at Ogilvy. Hi, Sam.
Hello there. I am just trying to share my screen, actually. Can everybody see?
Yes, perfect. Absolutely perfect, Sam.
Okay, that is great. Right. Thanks, Pam. Personalisation and purpose in an age of overwhelm. It's sort of, it's kind of meaty stuff. Shall I start with who I am and, to a degree, what I'm for? My name is Sam Trigg. I'm head of coaching and team development at Ogilvy for EMEA. I'm also on the global team and on the UK strategy. And actually, I have just had my 20th anniversary at Ogilvy, so I've been around for a while.
Congratulations.
My role means that I actually talk about purpose and these sort of big, by big I mean bringing out the inner greatness kind of questions pretty much all day long. And sometimes it feels like I'm stating the bleeding obvious because fundamental stuff like this at core is very simple, but it is definitely not easy. And I kind of feel the more complex the world becomes, the more potential there is for these really important fundamentals to kind of get lost in that overwhelm. So yeah, this is great because it's not enough to be thinking about these questions. We do need to be talking about them. And as individuals, we really need to be saying what we think out loud and sort of not leaving room for gaps, which can then get filled with assumptions, which even in the conversation earlier, that sort of the different perspectives and the complexity, if we're not articulating what we think, then we will get lost. So I've got here on the screen the Holy Grail, which is to achieve a point where it's possible for every individual to fulfill their purpose within the collective of the organization. And I thought I'd talk. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the sort of from to journey of Ogilvy over recent years, and to talk about some of the things that we're trying to do at the moment. And I'm very much talking from the perspective of my role. So this is drawn from coaching leaders, working with teams, and just kind of having been around for a while. And I thought I'd look at it through three lenses, all interrelated, but talk a little bit about the organisation perspective, then the individual perspective, and then sort of pan out into the wider world piece. So, can you all hear me all right? I hear a bit of an echo. That's okay, is it good? Yeah. So let's start off with the organisation. We have our founder here, David Ogilvy. It's I purposely used an old slide with the old logo, which is his signature, and his famous quote on divine discontent. So at Ogilvy, we do have a strong heritage, and actually that can be an advantage. It can also be a disadvantage. And although our values are very much still embedded in divine discontent, we've always struggled with this perception of being a sort of big, established, traditional advertising beast, which doesn't sound super agile, which is what all organizations need to be now. And actually, we are more change fit than that. And historically, although we are a big beast to a degree, we always had lots of opcos with sort of wide geographical representation and some big offices, some small offices, but largely given the freedom to operate with local autonomy. And the great thing about that was that it attracted quite entrepreneurial, kind of maverick leaders to a degree. Again, I would argue positive, very positive. However, that also resulted in us having quite a complicated matrix, because obviously we had lots of different markets with their own ways of working. And that was quite difficult for us, and importantly for our clients, IBM being one of them. So it was very good to hear from you, to navigate. So we very much recognize, okay, we don't feel future fit, and therefore we need to change. And we need to change to become more one Ogilvy. So the basis of our transformation, it was really global, quite, it's been going on sort of the last 4 or 5 years, was to simplify, unify and clarify. And that's really about collapsing structure, collapsing P&Ls, becoming more global and one Ogilvy. Not always a comfortable process. Sometimes it felt like the payoff was that we're gaining simplicity at the expense of autonomy. However, you know, 4 years on now, I'd say, as the dust has settled with the structure and the organization's kind of point of view is clearer, now individual autonomy has been coming to the fore again, and obviously that need for agility and flexibility has kind of facilitated that. And so I'm going to flick to our modern day values, but that is reflected in our values, which are, we still have divine discontent, which is sort of bedrock, pervasive creativity, eternal craft, adaptive connection, and relentless curiosity. And if we had more time, we could dig a bit deeper. But one of the things that for me is that actually there's a restlessness to all of these values, which is very intentional, because it is about the fact that, you know, change now is the only constant, really. It is our new normal. And sure enough, we're currently in another transitional period as our relationship with WPP, which is our holding company, is evolving under new leadership, Mark Reed's leadership. And then hot off the press, this week, our new global CEO at Ogilvy was announced. So we're getting Andy Main coming to join us from Deloitte. So it is, you know, really at the very top leadership level where we are entering into another big period of change. And during any kind of transition, the best way to engage with our people on the big issues is to invite them to take part. And for that, we need to listen to what they have to say. And I would argue, and I keep saying I would argue, don't I? I'm not that argumentative, but I would say that active listening, and I can move us along, but active listening is probably the biggest step change that we have made as an organisation over the past few years. And we have been doing a lot of listening. Very regular employee surveys, client survey, our Vantage survey, which is our client survey, lots of focus groups, a lot more networks that really do kind of work. And more recently, of course, safe rooms to specifically talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and the emotion that has let loose in the organisation, and really allowing space for people to be able to talk comfortably and safely about how they're feeling. So this listening piece, at first actually asking for constant feedback felt like a bit of a chore, to the point we were sort of worried that people would get survey fatigue, we kept saying. But actually now it really does feel part of the culture. It is not a sort of so much of a push-pull thing. It feels much more organic. And of course, you know, the stats around engagement level impact and how that impacts performance and growth are always going to be good. I've got here the 2019 Gallup report. So employees who feel their voices heard are over 4.5 times more likely to feel empowered to perform their best work, and highly engaged teams show 21% greater profitability. So all good stuff, but of course, you know, the key to engagement, actually, you know, listening is not enough. You then have to follow up with actions. There has to be a bit of a, you said, we heard you, and this is what we're going to do about it. So what is then happening at an individual level? So yes, the organisation is listening more, but it does follow that the individual has to then play their part in moving us from a more paternalistic to an adult culture. And to that end, we have been asking individuals to take more ownership and responsibility. It's no longer up to the organisation to sort of decide your destiny. It's up to you to create it, is the message, you know. So for that to happen, we need, everybody needs a sort of sense of understanding. So individuals need to really understand themselves. What is it that drives them? If you don't know that, then how can anybody help you with it? You need to then be able to communicate that to the people around you and therefore the organisation. You need to feel understood, that has, you know, what you want from life is being heard, and also to understand your kind of place in the organisation and whether therefore it's possible to achieve. So lots of kind of understanding that needs to happen, and really the best way to do that, and for all the fabulous programs and structures that you have in place, it does really come down to being able to have good, meaningful conversations. And so we have spent a lot of time focusing on great conversations between individuals and managers. We have ditched the old form-filling annual performance appraisal reviews, and we've really are investing time to help people get the most out of career conversations. And our career conversations do very much centre around purpose. I've got a box of everybody in front of my slide, so I can't read it. Sorry. Anyway, I'm going sort of slightly blind, but it centres around purpose, which is it's really important that I know what I'm doing matters. And then the pink one, I can't see.
Development. I know that I'm growing.
That's it. Thank you, Pam. Reaffirming that I know my contribution and achievements are recognised, extending so I feel challenged, and the expectations are, you know what I'm doing and I know what you expect of me. So the fact that there's sort of real clarity between the two parties, which immediately, for me as an employee at Ogilvy, as an individual, feels like a sort of more attractive proposition. And in terms of the career conversations, we ask them to take place continuously. So it's a minimum of 4 times a year. And yes, the conversations are sort of, we have a way of logging them, but the idea, that's only so that we can capture and keep those conversations moving forward. But it's much more about trying to keep them as sort of organic as possible. And we do encourage people to concentrate on 4 areas. So make sure that they're covering off these 4 areas in their conversations, and working with managers and individuals to make sure that they are both able to do that. And the 4 areas are around ambition. So helping people, and that's around what is your personal purpose, and helping people to understand what their ambition is, and making sure that how can we help you if you don't know what it is and you don't tell us what it is. Then business goals. So that is aligning personal ambition with the organisation's business goals, and making sure that that there is sort of clarity on what is expected from both parties, and obviously how you're going to get measured against that. Development, again, to make sure that both those sort of pillars can be achieved, and then feedback is the 4th. So constant feedback is very much part of what we're trying to do. And it feels all the time that the sort of challenge is, so we've had several iterations of this, but it's always when it lands, and therefore it ends up being quite subjective, because it is about the quality of the conversation, which is about that sort of very human element. So it needs to be, it's not like, oh great, we've got this fantastic system that you can go through, however good it looks on paper. If you don't have people who are really bringing it to life in a very human, meaningful way, it will always be a box ticking exercise. So we're really concentrating on making really making the conversations meaningful. But of course, conversations alone aren't enough. There needs to be backed up with action, and we aren't a sort of one size fits all. So each of our markets has its own talent plan. So for example, in an office like London, which is actually very sophisticated, they've got the most fabulous, rich, deep, robust plan. In the smaller markets, we definitely encourage them to concentrate on what matters to them. So it's, there's no point in doing everything if it isn't meaningful to you. So So concentrate on the things that are important to you locally. But across the organisation, there are actually lots of great initiatives and opportunities that are available to all, and actually increasingly at a WPP level, particularly at the moment around diversity and inclusion, creative employee experience, leadership development, coaching and mentoring, craft academy, talent mapping, mobility opportunities, you know, all that lovely good stuff. But the challenge we're facing at the moment is largely around, okay, well, how do we then join the dots between them? Because yes, there's all this lovely stuff available, but if in order for an individual to take ownership of their career progression, they have to be aware of, or we have to help them, we have to make them aware of those opportunities through good information platforms, really good communication. At the moment, the UK office are developing a people hub, which will really help with that. We've got a global learning hub also being developed. So that, for me, is the work in progress, in that there's a lot of good information out there, but we need to find a better way of making it navigable for the individual, so that, yes, they can take responsibility because they have a map in a way.
Yeah.
And that I feel at the moment is our, you know, the sort of current area where we're focusing a little bit of energy. So organisation, individual, what happens when you kind of bring those things together? So, and now my computer won't move on. I might have to ask Annie to step in.
I'm here, ready, waiting if you need me.
Yeah, do you want to pull the
Oh, there
slides
we
up?
are. Was that I did that?
Yep,
Or did you
yes.
do that, Annie?
You did that, Sam.
Okay, there we go. So the collective element, and this is the piece where I spend most of my time and energy around, which is sort of linking up the organisational sort of strategy and making it meaningful to the individual, trying to encourage that human connection at all time. Because actually, it's only when those two things, the organisation and the individual, work together, that both can thrive to the point where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So again, particularly in our industry, where really our talent is it. We're not. There's no sort of product. We're a communications company, and our offering to our clients is very dependent on our people's thinking and their ideas and their skills. So the best way to harness that, and it's very much in keeping with what Pam was saying, is through teamwork. And teams have always, you know, team as the unit of work has always been very important, but really now more than ever, we are projects are becoming so much more complex, and we're asking our people to be on multiple teams, simultaneously dealing with junior, senior, internal, external, horizontal, virtual stakeholders. It's really complex, and team effectiveness really can be the difference between success and failure. And I think there's a bit of an assumption that by the time people get into these top team positions, they just know how to be effective. Actually, at the heart of most business failures, you will find broken relationships and dysfunctional teams. So getting a team together and performing well is a skill, and it's actually what I spend a lot of my time focusing on. I know that I think I've just had a time call, so I'm going to précis and speed up, if that's okay. Just the last piece, which is that wider world, panning out to the wider world, because context is everything. And, you know, the current macro events, totally unprecedented, as we were saying in the conversation earlier. All the balls are up in the air and haven't landed yet. So we're all having to pivot. We're having to help our clients pivot, and we're lucky to be busy because, you know, it's not the same for everybody. But we're having to try and make sense of it as we go for us, but also for our clients. And there's no lovely, neat and tidy sort of perspective of hindsight. You know, that story will come. So as an organisation, I think our first priority, absolutely duty of care. And it forced us to cut through the white noise to what's important. And that's the well-being of our people. So as an organisation, actually, I think as most organisations, because we had to, we mobilized really quickly, and we sort of united against this common enemy, the virus. And we're now having to adjust to what was seen as a temporary crisis, which is now turning into, okay, this is going to be new normal, new ways of working. And as individuals, we've all been through different stages over the course of the lockdown. I personally feel like I've lived 9 lives. I'm sure everybody else has too. And again, we don't know what the full fallout of that will be for a while to come. For many, extremely challenging, and anxiety and burnout and that family work balance stress. But for others, lockdown has afforded them a moment of reflection, to spend time on personal prioritization, and for a lot of us it's been kind of a bit of both. There are a few silver linings which I won't share right now because I don't think we've got time, but maybe in the conversation I can. I just wanted to nod to the fact that in terms of the sort of wider world, I think this climate has really accelerated progress in terms of social awareness, and there is some real change as a result. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think the responsiveness to that, we have ended up, which I don't think we would have if we hadn't had the kind of pandemic climate, but we have ended up taking giant leaps where before we were doing really good stuff, but in more incremental steps. So, for example, only yesterday, Mark Reed issued a WPP client statement on our commitment to inclusiveness, diversity, and anti-racism in our work. And it's a great document, but it was just like, right, we recognize this is a moment, we've got a point of view, we've made a quick decision, and we're getting it out there. And I'm not sure we would have done that 2-3 months ago. So there are sort of silver linings, and it does all come back to listening. I think the individuals are going to end up being the architects of our future, and we're going to have to keep listening and keep communicating. I would say that as a coach. So there's my summary. When in doubt, go back to the purpose. And weirdly, I do think that this moment there is so much doubt and there's so much overwhelm that we're almost hanging on to our purpose tighter than ever. It's in some ways, being positive, it has afforded us a new clarity, and the challenge is, how do we make the most of it and hang on to that going forward? Hang on to the good bits. Thanks. Sorry, have I run over, Pam?
That was a really good presentation. Thank you. Do we have some questions coming in the chat, or shall I open the floor up?
We do. Glenn, if you'd like to talk through your question on the feedback, if you're able to come off mute. If not, I can.
Yeah, so you were talking very much about obviously people understanding their own kind of purpose, understanding their own values. Just would it be keen to know if you've got any experience? Do you use kind of coaching or 360-degree feedback to help people? Because some people can't see, they need an external sort of person to help them understand their own kind of values. So
absolutely. So we do both. So the 360 feedback is a really important piece in the career conversation cycle. So we ask everybody to have one of those at least a year, but also coaching is in terms of culturally, we've tried to sort of do quite a lot of educating everybody around the coaching style of management. So with a lot of coaching workshops for all employees, so that it's not everybody kind of understands how to get the most out of it, rather than just the leaders who have an awareness of it. And then also we have internally I coach a lot of the leaders, and we have other internal coaches, as Pam knows, because I would like to do a lot more with external providers, and we do on leadership programs specifically, but we're constantly constrained by budget now more than ever. Is that what you do? What do you do for your feedback piece? Glenn.
Yeah, so we've very limited use of 360-degree feedback, and I just think that there's a massive opportunity there. But I think it's about finding the right tool sometimes to do something like that, because some people have a bit of a fear of 360 feedback and how it will work, and can't people just have those honest face-to-face kind of conversations, and should they do it on a anonymous form or something? So I think there's a bit of hesitation around that, but it's something I'd like to get into a lot more.
So we have we do have a 360 feedback form that we've had designed that we use that has a cost per process of it, and that isn't available to everybody. But actually, internally, we have got created a sort of it's a really simple kind of stop, start, keep type of feedback form, which we ask everybody to send out to make sure they send out to sort of peers, seniors, and juniors, and to get it collected internally. I always would encourage, and we do offer that to be done anonymously, although I'm always would much rather people would be transparent and would be able to give feedback more directly, and that's the direction we're trying to travel in, to make it that feedback culture is something that we need to be doing all the time. But I do think internally you can create your own sort of form or process that actually doesn't take a lot of it doesn't need to be complicated in any way.
We've had a lot of requests for this in Thrive recently, in so much that we've designed a feedback framework into the platform where a manager who's being coached can just put 6 email addresses in, or 8 email addresses, send it out to the managers send the feedback through the platform, and then we can aggregate and pull over total insight on what's the general feedback about what it's like to work here, how you're doing in your job. But there's a lot of people starting to think about that, Sam and Glenn.
And also I would say that 2 things. One is to encourage the individuals to take responsibility for it. So yes, the managers can send the forms out, but get the individuals to nominate who they want to hear from, and then maybe adding a couple of more to make, and the other thing is more and more people, I think particularly, younger generations really want feedback. People want to hear how they're doing. So it's not a big sell.
Yeah, it should come from themselves, shouldn't they? And that's what we're doing. An individual can just shoot out for the feedback themselves without asking permission, and it comes directly to them without it being filtered or changed. So you get that open, clear, honest, immediate dialogue that can facilitate. And if you train people like you're doing, Sam, you've been outstanding at this, at doing these clear conversations where people really understand how to converse it well, then it can really unlock kind of a real kind of context and deep and good quality conversation. Well, thank you for that, Sam. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. And we're now going to invite Mel from Virgin Media to give us some insights on what's happening there.
Hi, folks. Thank you. Give me a moment just to get my presentation up. Lisa's raising a hand.
Who's raising a hand? Oh, there we are.
There we go. Perfect. Thanks so much, Mel.
No problem. Let's move you out of the way of my screen. Okay, so welcome everybody. I am Mel. I'm the Head of Learning and Development at Virgin Media. I've been with Virgin Media for about 3.5 years. L&D has always been my industry. I love it with a passion. And really kind of work to make a difference in it. So hopefully I'll be able to share some experience with you. Also, listening to everybody introducing themselves, there's a lot of different things that people wanted to know about from this conversation. So hopefully I'll answer some of those questions. I'm conscious of time, so I'll whistle stop through a lot of stuff, but if there's anything else you want some more information about, then you're welcome to reach out to me personally after this, or to ask some questions. I'll try and answer as much as I can. So straight into it. This is really what I'm going to talk to you about today. So takeoff, belonging strategy, performance, diversity of thought, and crew capability. You'll see there's a little bit of a theme of space going on here, and that will be more apparent in just a moment. But at the top, it's all about team play. So this is a real ethos of Virgin Media, this is really what's being driven throughout the whole of our teams and our functions. We are one team. And that's just landing. So it's, underneath we've got here also Step Up, Be Clear, Be One. And that's the message being driven throughout our leadership population. So by Step Up, it's literally by being transparent, being consistent. Be Clear is having a compelling plan. So your people underneath you know exactly where we're heading and what we're trying to achieve over our missions of 2020-21. Again, it's that I'm used to the internal brand stuff now, so I'm saying missions. And B1 is about really having a kind of defined purpose through everything we do. So we're all sort of heading in one direction. And with that, I'll head into my next slide. It might become a little bit more apparent what I'm talking about. So this is Virgin Media's internal branding. So you're probably all very familiar with the reds and everything that we do externally in terms of our brand. But this is our internal brand. And here we have, which is very apt for today's conversation, which is building connections that really matter, our purpose. So how did this come about? About this time last year, we had a new CEO, Schuler, who came from one of our sister companies, Unity Media in Germany. He arrived and literally within 2 or 3 months of embedding. So this is interesting times, right? Because we're going through a massive change with a new CEO and COVID. So it's, change on change, which is exciting for us. And at least we have a culture at Virgin Media, trying to grab everything and run with it. So he joined us and he came with us with a real clear message. We had a huge internal brand marketing campaign because he needed us to really energize the internal brand, get us all into one same track. Again, team play being at the center of that. But therefore we've got building connections that really matter. What do we mean by that? So that's building connections both with our customers and internally with our employees. And a lot of our initiatives that we're actually producing now, which I'm going to talk through with you, is really based on that. We feel that if our people and our customers feel engaged, then actually that's going to impact in terms of service and experience for both customer and employee. You'll see above our rockets, which, we're all used to the rocket now, is a bright star and North Star. So that's also another simple element that we've set so all of us understand our vision, which is to become the most recommended brand for our people and our customers. So I can reel this off now because actually we can all reel this off now to really simple things. We're a team, building connections really matter, and actually where we're heading is to be most recommended. And so we've already got that mindset of what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to keep on going, so I'll take questions at the end. But sorry if I'm pushing through. I'm trying to answer as much as I can for you. So one of the outcomes of this was our belonging strategy. So this is new and this is coming through, and we're actually setting this up now. I won't talk through all of it. There's a ton of information behind this, as you can see, but 3 main parts to it. One, which is building a working environment for psychological safety. And what we mean by that is there's a voice for everyone. Everyone should be listened to, everyone should be heard, and there should be some action that comes off the back of that. Having a diverse workforce, so this is people we're talking about in terms of those social mobility pieces, and how do we actually get unique characteristics into our workplace, and then strong together, so really kind of standing up. And one of our values there, the second point, smart disruption. So really, this is how are we actually going to deliver this into the organisation and delivering difference. I mean, certainly when we were talking earlier and some of the individuals talking about the belonging, diversity, inclusivity, this is what it's all about. So this is how we're going to change the narrative of inclusivity. So like a lot of corporates, employee networks have been around for many, many years. You've got obviously BAME, LGBTQ, disability, and they have networks and they've been going on for a long time. About 70% of corporates actually maintain those separate individuals. And so what we've decided to do within our belonging strategy is to create the belonging collective. Excuse me, I'm just going to have some water. So what we've done is take all those separate networks, because unfortunately by keeping them separate, you keep them underrepresented. And so we've joined them all together. So they are one big network now, and we have representations all across the board and they all work together. We've gone further than that in terms of actually they are now on our board for our employee, so our people, our customer, our product and our sustainability, which is really our inclusion and well-being. So regardless, what we're doing now is with that collective being involved in our purpose-defined decision-making, we make sure that we are covering all areas that we can rather than going out to different pockets. So what that means is that any product that we are going to design for our people, it goes through that collective first to ensure that we have covered everything we can. Any initiative we want to do for our people or for our customers, it goes through that collective to make sure that we are as inclusive as we possibly can. And we are thinking from all elements before we do anything. Upset for the you know, which is really good for the business, is purely the fact being that instead of having multiple different separate groups all coming to them for time and resource, you've just got one team, one focus, and it's all building towards the same thing. So it has been really good. You know, there's a line there of no one should be left behind, and that's really much what we're going to do. Again, I want to quickly answer some of the questions of how do we bring this all together. So this is about bringing a human in, absolutely. So in terms of that psychological safety, trust and authenticity, some of the things that we've been doing immediately is creating what we class as our Thrive videos. So this is from leadership top down, any member that wants to volunteer that are sharing their personal heartfelt experiences. So whether this is bereavement, depression, anxiety, stress, they are actually just sharing their experience and what they've gone through. You know, brings in a human, especially when you can see your very senior leaders and you see people, you know, giving, you know, accounts of their personal life, shows you that everybody's human. We're all in it together. Nobody is different. We've taken it one step further, that we've done what we call our belonging panel with our events called Breaking Down Barriers. And this is very different in terms of, well, it's a live panel, which we have nationally around sites. Obviously, our next one's going to be virtual. But for example, the last one we had, Holly Branson joined us. She spoke to all of our, you know, all our nation about her IVF journey and how emotionally hard and difficult that was, and how it was hard to keep face whilst trying to lead in Virgin. You know, next to her were our leaders talking about, you know, what they've experienced with alcoholism. You know, one mother that is, you know, carving a career for herself whilst bringing up a neurodivergent child. So, you know, in that essence, what we're trying to say is take the mask off. We are all human. We are all individual. We're all going through this together. And so therefore we should connect and breathe and on. Okay, so the process that kind of follows this up, and I know that there might be some deep in-breaths when you read some of this, and a bit like Sam was saying, what they did, we changed completely our performance process so we could maintain the individual, and this is really where it was to back it up. So you'll see here, I won't read you the screen, but instead of the usual biannual, we completely got rid of that. So now we have a framework for continuous conversations. But it's conversations of not just manager to employee. So we have what we call our quarterly 4. They have to happen 4 times because we were finding obviously the two annual conversations just really weren't working in terms of connection, in terms of building rapport, in terms of building team. So the quarterly 4 is a meeting with your manager, but actually it's the employee that asks the questions to the manager. So they get to select some from pre-selected questions. There's one mandatory, which is how am I doing with my goals? But the rest is entirely up to, you know, entirely up to them to choose that they want to have that conversation. They want to have those answers. So one might be what opportunities are available to me for my career. Another might be, you know, can we discuss the team culture? So yeah, it's a whole host of different questions. So that's really driven by the employee. Secondly, you know, we've got real-time goals. So that's really working on the projects that you're working now. So instead of your set objectives throughout the year, it's looking at those goals and you know, having an understanding about what you're working on at the moment and how we're measuring your performance on that. So for example, if I have a project for 2 months, then I should be working on that. I will speak to my manager in the 2 months. I might then have another piece of work where I then speak to them, you know, for a 6 months period. And so there's no, there doesn't have to be a certain amount of real-time goals that you have. It's just about continuous development and talking about your performance as you go on through that year. You'll see there, this is the in-breath as the removal of the individual bonus, and it's now down to team reward. Of course, individuals, we have, you know, it's down to the manager's discretion, as it says there, evidence-based to get bonus, financial reward. However, the team reward is, you know, is really starting to embed. And what actually it's done, because it's being seen as a team and not just individuals, managers are now sitting down having conversations about, you know, their targets, KPIs, whatever their achievement is for that financial bonus. And they're talking with their teams about what they need to achieve, but also how they're going to achieve it. And so everybody leaves with that compelling plan of we know exactly what we're doing and what we need to move towards for us to all achieve this team reward. And so that's made a real difference in terms about actually us coming together and working as a team and actually having that understanding. And breathe again, on she goes. Sorry, I know I'm talking fast, but I just don't want, I know people don't want to hear to me. I do talk fast anyway, so apologies. So this is just a really quick one, and I know it says here in quite big white lettering that it's not an initiative in itself. Diversity of thought is a real buzzword. at the moment. And for us, it's, we're not going to make everybody, just, you have to have diversity of thought. More about it is, is an influence across our people. So we're really asking people to seek out diversity of thought and, just to kind of look for people who have those different opinions to yourself, different outlooks. A part of the belonging strategy actually is that we've got a neurodiversity group that are working with some exceptional individuals about bringing in neurodivergent individuals into our organisation so that they can absolutely flourish in roles that are suitable for them and actually bringing them into our workplace. So although we say diversity of thought is an initiative, we are doing some work behind the scenes as part of our belonging strategy because, no one should be left behind. And so this is one of the key things we want. But in terms of all of our people, it's really just thinking that this is the way that you as an individual does count. You have an opinion, you're completely entitled to it. The majority of us are adults. And so therefore we're really kind of valuing that point and making sure that people understand that, having a difference of opinion. And actually Glenn made a really good point on the chat. He was saying about the fact you've got to ask the right questions. And this is a perfect example. We're not talking about how to return to the office. It's more about how do we work smarter. Again, it's just a different viewpoint of someone asking those different questions that actually get us to a much more richer conversation. Onward with this. So what am I doing in all of this? So this is the L&D bit. Obviously, I'm working with a belonging collective to make sure that everything that we are delivering into the business and that all of you will know a lot has changed over with COVID. And again, it's how do we build on that? So I'll run through these very quickly. So focus on the future. What are we talking about? And again, I hope I'm answering some of your questions here in terms of, when everyone was introduced themselves and what they were looking for. This is really having conversations about where we're going and what we're doing. Yes, it's about capability, but actually this is about, where do individuals want to go? What kind of skill sets are we going to need to have in the future? What are our priorities? And therefore, how are we going to give people opportunities? So this is having in-touch days where our employees can go and look at other teams and see how they're working, looking at skill sets. So automation is going to be a big one. Obviously, it's now starting to trickle through and is going to become at a faster pace through our organisation. But, we're not saying that we're going to be replacing jobs. It's more a case of, right, what do we need to think about now that people can start thinking about a career ahead of them? So, for example, we've done some, some workshops on robotic process automation. It's probably as dry as it sounds for those people that are into business analytics. However, we've had an increase of people that really wanted to just try it out. What's it like to do? How do we do it? So we partnered with an external provider to, we put on some of these workshops, talked about how digital capacity is coming. And actually since that, 6 of our individuals that have gone through the first 3 cohorts have applied for jobs that are completely basing and building our capability around robotic process automation. So we're not having to bring talent in just from giving people an experience of different skill sets. It's opening people's mind to going, okay, I can actually do something completely different in my organization. I'm learning this. And so because we know it's coming, we can kind of plan a bit of a development journey for them to learn the skill set that they need to start from that, be it an apprentice, be it an external qualification, be it experience and project work in which they're helping, you name it. It's just that point of trying to drive already some of those skill sets and the conversations and trying to get our people to think about the opportunity for them in the future so they can start thinking about their careers. Double that up with those performance conversations, you can really start seeing some of that momentum that's going towards where do we need to go for that capability. Okay, coaching, mentoring individuals' aspirations. So we have just launched as part of COVID. It was obvious that there was, it was having a massive impact being digital. People were loving it, but obviously, you are on your own with this, square. As Alicia was talking about, in front of you all the time. So in-house, my MD team, we built Connected, which is, I would like to say, it's like a dating app, but it's not a dating app. This is an app that we built for mentoring. This is phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be coaching. So really what it is we built it to be self-sufficient, self-led. It's an app that we've launched. So if individuals want to be a mentee or individuals want to mentor, so you can build those connections virtually as we're doing it now. You literally go on like a dating app, you register, you complete your profile, you talk about the skill sets that you have, the experience that you have. You can do it on certain skill sets if you want. So for example, it might be digital capability or project management or leadership or management. but really because it's more mentoring and coaching, it's really about the experience and actually having those connections with other people around different parts of the organisation that you would never usually network with. And, I mean, the app has obviously got some videos about the expectations and the framework for mentoring, etc. But within the first 3 days, we had 600 people sign up. We've got over 400 mentors that are signed up, and actually the majority of those are senior leaders that are really excited to get connected with individuals. And we kind of say do it for a 6-month period. People can rate their mentors or their mentees, you know, so, you know, it can be quite harsh if you want to, if you're a rubbish mentor. However, you know, it's just something that we wanted to introduce so people can connect to someone else in the organisation rather than just their team, still think about their development, you know, getting mentored on some of the stuff that they want to consider, especially in these times that we're living at the moment, how we move forward. Moving on with cross-functional development. So we're actually having a look at the future focused core competencies, but this is more about experience and gaining experience within the workplace. Core competencies, which I'm working with the business now. So for us, we're finding, again, like we've said, it's digital, it's data, it's project management actually is coming into it, being a bit more formed. Thinking about where we're going, especially in that more agile sprint working. It's like looking at how you work within a project. And so we're looking at these competencies and trying to provide opportunity for people to experience them. So are there projects that people can get aware with? And so we post them. And so then we have, yeah, so sorry, there's a question just flipped up, just completely, wait, I'll answer that in a minute. So yeah, so there was an element of giving people opportunity to have experiences. Can they get involved in projects? Can we do some secondments? Can we do some job swaps? Anything really to actually getting them to actually doing the job. So for me, in my mind, I'm very visual. It's about how do you drive a car? You drive it, you know, behind the steering wheel rather than just watching a PowerPoint of it. So what we try and do is set up these areas, action learning sets, real-time learning, real work projects, all those kind of things. So this means that what we're doing is developing skill sets. So actually we've got people that we can project, I think like Sam was saying, you know, multidisciplinary across functions, but there's a core skill set that we can actually, again, provide people opportunity to. Agile principle, I'm not going to talk about agile methodology. Everyone's talking about agile methodology. But my thing here is about learner experience and the principle of value. So, you know, a lot of L&D, you know, we talk a good game, you know, everything that we're doing and isn't it fantastic, but actually some of it isn't really successful. They can't really produce a lot of ROI or ROE. And so therefore my vision with my team, which we're really working on, is about the learner experience. So we won't create anything unless we've spoken to the learners to find out that what we're developing is for them, is the best solution for them, and is how they will be able to most quickly, most effectively apply the learning that we're asking them to do. So everything is kind of flipped. It's more about here you are, this is it, you've got to, you know, what can we do for you, rather than the organisation kind of pushing that big bellowing, this is what you need to do. Again, Agile is about customer, you know, producing the solution for the customer to get the most value. Our customer is our learner. So learner XP is massive, which then leads me to final point of our ops model. So at the moment, we have to change ourselves. The world is changing. I've got a large function. I've got 84 people in my function across 4 divisions and 6 academies. So, you know, but we are now just going through a completely different operational model of transformation, purely because we need to change with the times and how we're dealing with the business and what we're delivering to the business. So for an example there with the Learner XP, instead of instructional designers, I've now got learning experience designers. I'm bringing people in just to literally work in terms of learning insights-led analytics. So we can actually, instead of getting the data at the end of it, we've got the data before it to make sure that we're driving what we need to drive ahead of the game. Yeah, I mean, there's just a complete change. And again, I could probably talk for another 4 hours and bore you all terribly, but I'm not going to. But a very quick overview about what Virgin Media are doing, about, you know, individuals, about making people feel belong, and also what we're working on at L&D to try and make these individuals get what they want, how they need it, you know, for themselves, so they've got something to work towards in the future to think about in Virgin Media. And that, I think, is that. And I'm sorry for talking so fast, but you don't want to listen to me anymore.
Thank you, Mel. That was a great presentation. Can we either pull some questions from the chat, or do people want to ask them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the ones that's come in for you, Mel, specifically is, does Virgin Media provide any training for people to be mentors before allowing them to sign up to the app?
Yeah, no, this is a good shout, because a lot of people ask this question, and the answer is no. Because what you're doing is asking people's advice, and that's where it's going to be different with the coaching. There's definitely, we've created videos on, you know, expectations to be a mentor and a mentee. You know, we've provided frameworks of how that should look, templates that you can, you know, download from the app, you know, on terms of how do you structure that. We also didn't make it the fact that you've got to be a higher, you know, you can have, it's like, you know, reverse peer mentoring, you know, so it's just a case of you don't have to have a higher mentor to you, rather than, you know, it's just open to anyone. So I could have someone that might be in a lower grade than me, but is much better at IT than me, and I want to ask her some questions. And again, you know, we had to do a real strong emphasis. This is not coaching, it's mentoring, that I ask advice and where I could potentially go to get some more information and what I can do. And so I think in terms of that, it's really one of those, you know, those elements of just, we wanted to keep it free. The more we try to boundary it, the more trouble we're going to get into. That might not be the right answer you want to hear, though.
Yeah, that's no, perfect. And then another question that's come in: how do you find time to make sure that people are I will start again. How do you ensure people have time for personal development? It's great to have the resources, but our challenge is that people are too busy in their day-to-day jobs. And just to add on to that as well, in the COVID environment, people are, as Pam mentioned in her presentation, just getting through their to-do lists.
Yeah.
So how are you ensuring that people are getting to their personal development?
Okay, so it's a really great question, and I haven't got the answers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really sorry to say this. So we work with the business in terms of, so for example, you know, like our call centres, you know, time is but the essence. So we're working really hard with our planning to make sure that we actually plan out some time for them to have learning and development. We already have what we class as in-touch days, which is shadowing, or it can be a morning or an afternoon, but it's a block really in which you can go and shadow other teams, other roles, and that's been going on for quite some time. I think in terms of the everyday, we've really put it down in terms of having those. I think those development conversations has really helped back that up. People of understanding that they need to learn. It's also an acceptance from us that people will learn in their own time through Google, TEDx, YouTube, you know, whatever it might be, and to welcome that rather than to want to funnel everyone through our L&D, you know, faculty. So I think ultimately it's the managers are having those conversations, and people are recognising that they need to develop in ways to keep the future because they want to. And when you've got people that want to develop, they will find some time. It's really difficult. You guys have found some time to attend this, you know, and sometimes, and as a manager myself, you know, it's like, stop it, do some work. We were talking about burnout earlier on, you know, tell my team, take some leave. When you're taking leave, I know we're at home, but you need to take some time off because this is very draining. So I think it's having those conversations that are actually going to build that up. And from an L&D point of view, we work very hard with the business to say, listen, you can't expect us to be over here if you're not giving us the time to invest. And those are continuous conversations, to be fair.
Well, you talked about the Inclusion Collective. How are you creating inclusion that's driven by the individual rather than you guys pushing, we've got to be inclusive? How are you making it come from the person? Yeah,
so that's the Learner XP part, Pam, to be honest. So we work with the Belonging Collective in terms of making sure, because obviously we've got a really aggressive digital strategy now. We had it before COVID, but COVID just, you know, sped it into hyperspace. So, you know, it's now we're just making sure that what we're actually developing is inclusive to all parties within our organisation, and that's something that we're going through. But then on the flip side, you know, part of the new model is having performance consultants that are going to go, you know, we're talking to those learners. Whatever we do in terms of a learning project, we will always go out to those individuals, collective, do focus groups, just really to find out what is going to land to them, what do they want, what will work, what they won't. And, you know, we can do bells and whistles, innovation, but actually if they say we need a piece of paper and a flow chart, then that's what we'll give them. It's whatever they want and how individuals find it, and by getting that rich information, actually what we're producing is much more valuable.
Thank you. Any other questions from the participants? I could ask you a million, Mel.
Please don't.
So are you happy if anybody's happy to come off mute and just ask Mel a question, or any of the panelists actually at this point a question, please do bring yourself off mute.
Perfect, great. If you can think of anything, anybody who wants any more information or, you know, more, yeah, by all means, get in touch with Pam. Quite happy.
I'm going to ask you one more question, if I may.
Yeah.
Talk about, you know, this thing about superpowers. Everybody having superpowers. How do you bring the kind of the introverts, you know, the people that are not as forthcoming? How are you providing the mechanism within this one team approach for them not to be embarrassed or inhibited or intimidated by the more extroverts characters?
Yeah, and I think that's really key. I think it's similar to what Sam said, you know, it's really down to your network, you know, who you're working with, talking to the individuals about who they are comfortable speaking with. It's not assuming that you need to get some information off of them because they're introverts. Yeah. And to be honest, it is that one-to-one relationship with them. So therefore, there's a lot of leaning on the managers to be able to have those conversations. I think in all honesty, we've seen a really different viewpoint from having changed our performance management process, because actually where we used to have managers that didn't really have a lot of one-to-ones with their team, they'd have the 2 conversations as much as we would, you know, encourage it. Now this actually means that they have to have those conversations and they have to talk to these individuals and start building relationships with them and start to get an understanding about what they're doing and what they want and how that they can service them. So we're getting a lot of people streaming through in terms of what can we do for this individual, what can we do for that individual, and yes, it's up to our workload, but it's exactly what we want to hear. So I think, in honesty, Pam, to answer your question, it's about, you just have to accept these individuals and you communicate with them the way in which they want to be communicated to. It's again about the individual. Be a human, ask some questions. Do they want to answer any questions? You know, yeah. Can we do everything we want for them, just so they know that they've got a voice and we can hear?
It's an interesting approach about letting people pick the questions that they want to ask their manager and kind of taking the responsibility for it being their conversation rather than the manager's conversation.
Absolutely, and because it's, you know, because basically employees are asking the questions that they want to know the answers to, which is great. And it's not just about a manager pushing down that performance and, you know, having that unbalanced stance of I'm manager and your employee. It's really flipped it. And so managers have to, you know, for me, you know, I'm answering all sorts of questions, but also it's really great, you know, because it's opening up different conversations that I hadn't already had with some of my team members.
Yeah, amazing. Sam, you were talking a bit about this kind of emphasis on how to help people have good quality conversations. And I know a lot of the corporates that we work with talk to us about how do we embed good conversational skills within our whole community so that there's a willingness for just kind of this fluency and open dialogue. Can you just talk a little bit about, you know, kind of some of the headlines on how you've created this impulse for good quality conversations?
Sure. It's largely based in getting managers to embrace the sort of coaching style of management. So so running work, I've run lots of workshops around coaching workshops, and it's about getting people, yes, it's, you know, active listening and crafting questions and goal setting, but it's actually getting them to practice and have those conversations as much as possible with their peers, and then take it back to their teams. So for me, it's you know, as in all these things, it's not that it's difficult to do, but it is. It's simple stuff that is often overlooked, and it's about creating shared language and a way of doing things that people feel comfortable with. And then as soon as they have the habit, then the idea is, you know, it'll feel organic and, you know, embedded. But yeah, so no rocket science to it. It's just making it, flagging it as something that's important.
Yeah. Janet, you came with a requirement to kind of understand a bit about how to bring the best of people's skills to the table. Do you feel as though you've had some stimulation in that topic? Are there any questions that kind of come out of that you'd like to ask the team? Is Janet still on?
I think Janet's had to drop off.
No,
we've had a couple of people who just had to nip to meetings and things, so I don't think she has. But
I'll pick up Alexander's comment then. Is Alexander still on? Which is, you know, how you create and drive a sense of purpose, and, you know, for people that have been in a job a long time and thinking about how to develop their career and that, you know, make the changes because they've lost the sense of purpose. Is it giving you some thoughts and ideas about how to?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting to be able to share with some of our executives we work with, you know, intelligence from other organisations doing really positive things and who are willing to share it. One of the comments I made just to share when people were talking about coaching and 360 and helping people have meaningful discussions about purpose particularly, one of the tools we use is StrengthScope. And every executive MBA we work with, we get them to do that questionnaire right at the beginning of the course. And as with lots of psychometrics, it's just a brilliant jumping off point to have really meaningful conversations about, you know, it's connected to positive psychology, and it's a very positive discussion about what really genuinely energizes you, how much of that mix is in your work at the moment, and how can you optimize those opportunities, or how can you draw job craft to try and make sure some of what energizes you is in the mix. And I think for executives as well, understanding that concept of energizing strengths is a really useful conversation to then have with their team members and think about, well, what kind of objectives are you setting? It doesn't mean you can avoid, you know, weaknesses, but it's a very positive way of looking at development and retention, I think.
Brilliant. Well, we've had a great discussion today. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for really contributing to the discussion. It would be incredible for us if you just take a couple of minutes after the session to give us some feedback on how you found it, so that we can continue to learn ourselves. And we have another event on the, Emma, just to bring you in, is the 6th of October, 7th of October, on Going Beyond Are You OK, which is where we're starting to think about, you know, kind of what's the conversation that you need to have for people that are suffering this burnout.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect, Pam. Thank you. I've just sent. You should hopefully have the feedback forms in your email box now. Hi, I'm Emma. I think I've spoken to almost all of you at some point in time. I'm in the background, so that's fine. But thank you so much. What an awesome conversation this morning. It's been brilliant. Really, really good. Thank you to Sam, to Mel, to Pam, and to everyone who has attended and and been involved. Thank you. Awesome.
We're going to post the recording on our website, so if you want to be able to have it or share it with other people, we can send you a passcode to be able to have a look at that. And if you want any of these slide packs, then I will happily share those. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Annie.